Hi, welcome to the Fast Intelligent Care podcast. I'm Chanelle, and today we have Sarah Collison, who's very well known in the OT community, especially the NDIS space. So, Sarah, for those who don't know you, would you be able to introduce yourself and tell us what you're passionate about?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me, first of all. So I'm Sarah Collison. I'm an occupational therapist based in Sydney, New South Wales. I've been an OT for over 20 years now. And the last kind of 11 of those years has been working in the NDIS space. So very passionate about working with people with disability to help them get the best outcomes possible when it comes to utilising their NDIS funding, but also very passionate about helping occupational therapists who are navigating the space be able to assist the clients that they are working with as well.
Oh, wonderful. And well done on your expos at ATSA. I hear you got the award for most pre-registered seminar, I believe.
Yes, there was.
Yeah.
So, which is always a nice little recognition to receive. So, yeah.
Yeah, I attended Biofriend, draw quite a crowd, so I think there's quite a lot of OTs that definitely need that support with navigating the NDI space. So we'll go through the OT or the AT process, the assistive technology process. We'll look at what do you do during the assessment stage before funding, if funding's rejected, and then if it does get approved, what is the process of making sure that that equipment does get used? But I think first I would just want to ask a bit more about your OT journey, why you initially decided to do occupational therapy, what drew you to the role, and if there's any specific moments or experiences that really shaped you as an OT.
Look, I think, obviously when you're going into your first kind of degree, really, when you leave school, it's kind of hard to know what you actually want to be. So I know that for myself, I didn't really know what OT was. I knew that I didn't want to be a teacher. Both of my parents were teachers and had kind of, led me into that direction. There was flexibility in teaching and things like that, but I didn't really feel like I was going to love being a teacher. And so I think I kind of stumbled across OT when I attended a uni open day. And my aunt is actually an OT, but I really still didn't know very much about it. And I kind of put it down as, that's what I'd like to do. And then I actually missed out on OT on the first round of offers. And I was very disappointed. And that's when I realized, okay, obviously I'm leaning towards this. There's obviously something about, what I've been reading up about it that's, of interest. And so thankfully in the second round of offers, I was given an offer to the University of Sydney. So, but still I didn't really know everything about it. Like I knew that it would be about helping people. And I think that's what I was passionate about. But really had no idea what it would actually lead me to. I think I always thought when I first started studying that I'd actually be a PEDS OT. I thought that sounded really fun. And then when I got to kind of fourth year and I was actually offered a PEDS placement, I realized I actually had no interest in PEDS whatsoever, that I'd kind of come across so many other facets of OT whilst I was studying that I didn't really want to do that. And I had done an OC rehab placement in third year and I really enjoyed that kind of role of OT, and which was very much assessment focused, planning, a lot of communication, a lot of facilitation, a lot of negotiating, that type of thing. And I really enjoyed it. So I actually elected to do another placement of OC rehab in my fourth year and was then offered a job by that employer that I was on placement with to start as a new grad OT. So.
Oh, great. So that was your first role out of uni.
Yeah. And definitely I find the workplace rehab space offers a lot of opportunity for development of assessment skills in particular. Task analysis, identifying physical demands, cognitive demands of work roles, breaking those down, building those back up into return to work plans, and then a lot of report writing as well. So, having to do monthly progress reporting for every single client, having to write initial assessment reports, having to prepare return to work plans. Like there was a lot of documentation and I really enjoyed that type of work. So I actually was able to continue working in that kind of workplace rehab field for a good 10 years because I really did enjoy it. So
what was the when did you decide to move on from that?
So I had actually gone to the UK. I'd worked in the UK for 5 years, again in workplace rehab. And when I came back, I did a little bit more work in that space. But I kind of realized I was burning out from it. I wasn't as keen. And I, at that point, moved into more management and leadership roles anyway. So I wasn't on the ground being that clinical practicing OT anymore. And I actually had moved to a new organization where I was in a business development manager role. And it was an organization that had an office in the Hunter region here in New South Wales, which was one of the sites for the trial phase of the NDIS. And so in that business development role, I was doing a lot of attending provider forums and helping the OTs in the team to start delivering services within the scheme. And I just kind of was really blown away by what it was going to mean for people with disability to have this really individualized and tailored way of getting support. And there was something about it that I just thought, I really want to be a part of that. And so I eventually moved on from that provider, and I moved back into a hospital-based role, funnily enough. I'd never really worked in hospitals before, but I was suddenly the OT department manager for a really large rehab hospital here in Sydney. And at the same time, the NDIS was starting to prepare for rollout across the rest of the country. And so I kind of said, look, I think this is a really great opportunity for us. I think we should really look into it. And so I kind of took on that more business development role again of actually setting up and preparing the hospital to start delivering services to NDIS participants. And I really, really enjoyed it, but also could really see that I wanted to kind of get my hands in a bit more and actually do some of the clinical. And I think the turning point for me was I actually went out to see a client. So one of our first participants that was referred to us, and it was a young woman who was living in the family home. She'd been living in the home for quite some time. And Dad had kind of made a makeshift ramp for her, and it was so non-compliant. It wasn't funny. It was a terrible ramp. And I'd said, look, we really need to replace this ramp. And it was, I'd prepared a recommendation, a report to the NDIS. And I got a call from this planner who said to me, and these were his words, were, I actually don't think this is like a good use of taxpayer dollars to pay for this ramp. And I was like, I'm sorry. And he said, no, I don't think it's necessary. That what they've got is fine. And I was like, no, actually it's not. Like, it's really bad. And you really need to take a proper look at this. And even though, she's not leaving the house that often because she had quite a significant disability, she had very high care needs. They didn't really have support workers set up yet. I was like, this ramp is the gateway for her to be able to actually engage more in her community. Like, this is what is needed to ensure that this can be done safely and that the family can continue to support her. And I just saw this kind of light bulb of, no, this is someone who needs fighting for, and I'm really prepared to step in and take that fight. So I kind of from that point decided that I really wanted to get more into the clinical side of things. And so I kind of took a step back and I went and did a whole bunch of AT courses with some different AT suppliers to kind of upskill and kind of refresh myself. I did all the kind of home mods courses that were available to become a home mods assessor, and decided that I would go out on my own and I would start providing those clinical services to NDIS participants. And that's kind of how it started.
That's amazing. You definitely, I think, as far as I know, shaped a lot of the NDIS as well. I think you're a part of the committee.
So I'm part of the NDIS reference group for OT Australia, and prior to that was on the NDIS task force. So I've been involved in kind of working alongside and with OT Australia for the last 5 or 6 years on how OTs need to kind of work within the scheme. And I also facilitate the NDIS OT Community of Practice on Facebook, which is a group of just over 12,000 OTs that are kind of all working within the scheme. And very much, collaborating with one another and supporting one another as to how to best navigate the scheme and its complexities in order to best support NDIS participants.
And there's been quite a lot of changes recently, but I imagine you would have been there for all the changes that it's gone through. What has been some of the biggest changes that you've seen within the NDIS over time?
Yeah, look, I think it's been a benefit really to have been there almost since the beginning. So when I first started working in the NDIS space, it was back in 2024. So when the trial phases were just starting. And as I said, was in one of those regions working in that kind of business development and service delivery phase of getting a provider kind of up and running. And what I find really interesting about it is in the very early years of the scheme, I'd go to these provider forums and they used to always show these images of like a plane flying in the air that is still being built. And so the plane's not completely built, but it's flying. And they used to always talk about how the scheme is kind of being built as we go. That was the analogy that they used to use in those kind of first 4 or 5 years. And what I kind of look at it now and see is that the plane is kind of built. It's not built very well, but it is built. But the airport that it has to land on keeps moving, and they don't tell you where the airport's going to be. One day you think the airport's in Sydney and then it's in Melbourne the next day, and you have to suddenly change direction. The plane's now flying over there, but by the time you get there, it's moved to Brisbane. And that's the analogy that I kind of use now, is that plane is flying, but the location or that landing, page or whatever you want to call it is shifting constantly. And I think that's what actually makes it really hard for OTs, is that, what we think is needed one day, it's going to be something else the next day. Or what one planner says in one response to an application, another planner directly contradicts that the day after. And I think that's what makes life so hard for OTs and other allied health professionals that are trying to help clients navigate the scheme and facilitate getting funding decisions, is that the goalposts seem to be constantly changing. And that makes it really difficult, because it makes you second guess yourself. And it also makes your clients second guess you as well. And it's really not the fault of the OT. It's that we are working with an agency that is in a bit of chaos and turmoil, quite frankly. And that means there's a flow-on effect to participants and to providers in how to then try and deal with that agency.
And if you could wave a magic wand and you could redesign, let's say just one aspect of the NDIS, what would you...
I'll put an OT in charge straight away. That's what needs to happen. An OT needs to be in charge of the NDIS. They need a CEO as the OT. I think there's a number of things that need to happen to fix the NDIS. It's a huge beast, if you like, and I think, unfortunately, it hasn't been well managed over the last few years. And I think that in the rush to try and reform and overhaul the scheme, they're not actually stopping and listening to the people that best know the scheme is the problem. And it's really interesting because I actually saw someone shared an article on LinkedIn this morning, which was a kind of overview or an article about the current CEO that we have. And it was done at the time that she came into the scheme itself, which was back in kind of 2023. And I found it a really interesting article, because when you read through some of the quotes, she kind of talked in the article about how part of what is needed when you are a public servant is you have to really think about the impact that is having on the people around you, and in particular the people that are in the scheme itself. And there was one quote in particular, which I'll just read, because when I read it, I was like, if only you were actually doing this, though. This is part of the problem. And at the time in this article, the CEO said, I think the only way you can do that as a public servant in terms of understanding the impact that this is going to have is to leave your power behind and actually listen to the community as to how they think or work on the ground. And sadly, that has not happened at any point in the last couple of years when we're looking at this reform. They have absolutely held on to that power and have exerted that power over participants in the scheme and really haven't stopped to listen to the community at all. And I think that's why we are where we're at now, in that we've got real significant concerns about people with disability being left behind. And we've got real concerns about the safety and well-being of many of our participants, because some of these changes that are being implemented, whilst they might look good on paper, if they'd actually stopped and listened to the community and asked us what the implications of them would be, we could tell them they've got a lot of unintended consequences. And that's what we're now seeing, is a lot of delays in service delivery, a lot of inability to actually access services. And that's only going to make outcomes for participants worse in the longer term.
Yeah, I can imagine the travel budget being cut. There's so many areas that now wouldn't be viable for therapists to service.
Yeah, that is a huge issue. It's a huge issue, and it's one that I don't think they really thought through at all. And also it carries through not just to the therapists, but also to the therapy assistants. They really wanted to build this model of having therapy assistants. You can't cover the cost of the wage of the therapy assistants if the travel rate for a therapy assistant is halved by 50%. It's actually not possible. And so a lot of service providers are not only having to pull back on their travel radius, stop servicing some of those regional areas, but are also having to remove some of those allied health assistance models that have been set up as well, which is really disappointing for participants. It's going to have a real significant impact. I think the problem we have, though, is that we may not see that impact immediately. We're probably going to start seeing it in the coming months and in the coming years. And that's very hard to then unwind that. And I think that's why many of us were very hopeful that the agency would actually stop and listen when we said there's a problem with what you're doing here with this price guide. But they don't seem intent on listening at all, which is really disappointing.
So there's been no move to change that at this stage?
Not at this stage, no. Yeah.
Do you think that we'll see, because a lot of therapists I've supported have talked about there being quite a lot of burnout within the NDIS already. Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll see a lot of therapists kind of move out of that space? And
I think we're already starting to see that. So already here in Sydney, I know at least 3 or 4 practices that have closed their doors, and some immediately with very little notice, unfortunately, to participants. But they have simply said they cannot afford to continue to provide and deliver services under this new price guide. So we are going to see that immediate impact. I think what we'll see is some providers who will try to hang in there in the hope that the agency will actually see sense and make a change. I think we'll see a number of providers who will actually let go of their registration so that they can charge what they like, and which is totally reasonable for them to do as well. I think there's probably a concern about bigger picture, what is actually the purpose of these changes of the price guide? And I suspect that there's a bit more at play than simply trying to save a bit of money. We know that allied health only makes up about 11 or 12% of NDIS spend every year. So it's actually probably not going to have an immediate significant impact on reducing the overall spend of the NDIS. But certainly what it will have an impact on is reducing the number of providers that are operating with this in the scheme. And I suspect that there may be more to this being a strategy around that than anything else. That actually the Commission is really struggling to actually oversee the number of providers, particularly those that are unregistered, and that this might be a way of reducing some of the provider numbers and bringing the scheme back into a more manageable state. But we'll have to wait and see.
As far as I know, you are, I guess, you supervise a few OTs across Australia. Mm-hmm. Have you, I guess, been able to help support them to come up with ways that they can minimize that, I guess, that they're carrying those extra costs that now is no longer being covered? Like, is there any strategies that OTs or therapists are putting in place that
Look, I think a lot of therapists used to absorb a lot of things because they were able to kind of make it work and probably didn't value their time well. I know for us, for example, here in Sydney, we never charged for non-labour. We never charged for kilometres or tolls because we were always able to make it work for us, in terms of the hourly rate that we receive for assessment, therapy and travel. But with the cutting of that hourly rate for travel, we can't make that work anymore. So our response has absolutely been to say, we now need to charge for the kilometres and tolls. And that's what our communication to our clients has said, is that, previously we never charged for this because we were able to make this practice work just with the rates we received. But with the rate being halved, it's not possible anymore. And so now we need to start charging for those other things. And we've only really had kind of one client push back a little bit on that. And so when I explained to them that actually they wouldn't be any worse off, we're just trying to make up some of that loss of that 50% of the travel rate, they were actually okay with us doing that. But I think a lot of providers will also be looking at things like, if they weren't charging for preparation time for therapy sessions, or maybe they were absorbing a lot of non-billable travel by going beyond the 30 minutes, they'll probably stop doing that and bring that back in. There's also a lot of things providers can do around, reconsolidating some of the caseloads that, if you've got therapists going in 5 different directions each week, relook at those caseloads and maybe have them only go in 2 directions and see multiple clients so that you're actually reducing the amount of travel, or you're grouping more therapists together. So I think there's a lot of strategies that OT practices can look at, but it's very much dependent about what they're currently doing or what they're currently not doing as to how they might be able to address that.
That makes sense. Yeah. So they're already, if they were already, I guess, billing for that travel, there's now not going to be, it's going to be definitely going to be a cut. But
yes, yeah.
If they're absorbing it beforehand, they can.
They would no longer absorb it. Exactly. Yeah.
And would telehealth be something that you think, well, I guess telehealth's not ideal. We would want to be in the client's environment, but do you think that's maybe something that will become more common?
Look, I'm very happy to go out and say that I don't like telehealth. I don't think it's best practice whatsoever. I don't think that it enables us as OTs to truly assess and understand someone's support needs. I don't think it's the best option, particularly for things around AT prescription or home mods. That's an absolute no-no for me. But even things just for functional assessments or SIL or SDA, you cannot see via telehealth all the things that you see when you are there face-to-face with a participant. And so whilst, yes, in some scenarios, it may be the only option, from my perspective, it should not become the default option. I just think that from my perspective, I would rather say no than to try and do something via telehealth and know that it's a half-baked attempt at doing an OT assessment. So, but everyone's very different on their perspective around telehealth. And for some, they might find that it works really well, but it's just not for me. And it's not for my practice.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with the AT and home mods would be it. The chances of you actually ending up prescribing the wrong thing and actually using those funds possibly incorrectly is a risk. So you wouldn't want to.
And I think it does put OTs in a really difficult position, because it's like, well, if you know someone's going to go without service completely, what's the worst of the 2 scenarios? That they go without completely, or you try and do it via telehealth, but actually you don't do it well, and then they're at risk because you've messed up somewhere, because you are limited in what you're actually able to assess and prescribe when you're trying to do it via telehealth. Particularly if you're relying on family members to measure things or take photos, like that can be really difficult. So, yeah.
Thank you for your insight on the NDIS. We'll go on to our second part, which will talk about the AT process, looking at what we do before funding.